Welcome everyone. Thanks for coming to our live Zoom. Big thank you to Lauren for joining us live. It makes such a difference, and that way you can participate in Q&A after or just discussion. And great to see the turnout and some familiar faces on Zoom. Thanks for coming. So Lauren Levey serves on the board of WDI USA. She also coordinates its Lesbian Caucus and its state legislative advocacy team. In addition, she coordinates the Lesbian Bill of Rights International, or LBORI, which is an international radical feminist network of lesbian organizations. And I know they have their own Twitter too, so check that out. And without further ado, take it away, Lauren.
So 1 month ago, a man shot and killed a young couple that he didn't know outside the Jewish Museum in Washington, D.C., while yelling, "Free Palestine." 2 weeks later in Boulder, Colorado, another man set a group of strangers on fire, including a Holocaust survivor. In both cases, the victims were chosen because the attackers believed they were Jews and because the attackers wanted to kill any and all Jews. After the burn attack, legacy media featured how tragic it was for the family of the perpetrator. The poor daughter of the perp might not be able to attend medical school in the US now. Very sad for her. With this kind of news coverage, legacy media is aiming to humanize the perpetrators, but not their victims. To some Jews, it came as a surprise that the terror attacks on Jews were seen by many not as a sign of danger to all Jews, but as a sign that all Jews might deserve to die. In the new paradigm, the more that Jews are victimized, the more that Jews are seen as perpetrators. So let's be clear. Intentionally killing as many members as possible of an identifiable ethnic group, Jews, for instance, is an act of genocide. There's now a campaign to kill not only Israeli soldiers, not only Israelis, not only those who support the existence of Israel as a Jewish state, but all Jewish women, children, and men everywhere in the world. Globalize the Intifada is its call to arms. The people involved in that campaign perform the reversal of calling Jews genocidal for attempting to win a war against all Jews globally. Reversal should be a familiar tactic to radical feminists. Like Jews who defend their boundaries, women who defend boundaries are framed by our enemies as exercising illegitimate power. It is said that women don't have the right to say no because women are not legitimate humans. Only men are. In some conversations, women aren't even seen as a legitimate, definable group because it is said that sex itself is undefinable. In other conversations, women are indeed definable as the naturally, immutably subordinate class of servants to men who can legitimately be subjected to forced pregnancy and childbirth. Women who push back and say no, as if they have the right to do so, are framed as bigot, turf, Nazi dyke feminists who deserve to be raped, tortured, and killed in the most horrible ways imaginable. Death by fire, favorite. Similarly, the perceived exercise of power by Jews is increasingly framed as illegitimate and likely connected to a global Jewish conspiracy that controls mysterious global purse strings and all media everywhere. It is at least implied that Jews cannot be trusted with power or money or media platforms. In some conversations, Jews aren't even a legitimate, definable group. They are really white Europeans who lie about having Middle Eastern origins in order to steal Arab land. So Jews are either too white or not white enough. But the phrase, Jews will not replace us, makes it clear that Jews are not considered white by those who actually care the most about whiteness. The point seems to be that neither the far left nor the far right wants to claim kinship with Jews, because kinship might lead to empathy with Jews. Like women and girls, every member of the scapegoat class is said to have all those character traits that the ruling class deems both undesirable and utterly unlike the ruling class. A scapegoat must not be seen to have even one shared characteristic or one redeeming quality, because empathy would break the spell and ruin the functioning of the scapegoat device. So similar to TERFs, right? Jews who insist on their rights as a fully human people and nationality are framed as literal genocidal Nazi blood-sucking thieves who deserve to be raped, tortured, and killed horribly, preferably by fire. And if you are both woman and Jew, the hatred is synergistic. Like support for women's sex-based rights, support for the Jewish state of Israel is no longer compatible with the far left agenda. The New York City Dyke March has banned both TERFs and Zionists. 25 years ago, Andrea Dworkin wrote an insightful comparison between woman-hating and Jew-hating. And this seems like an appropriate time to revisit that. The construction of a scapegoat is a classic and effective tool for authoritarian manipulation because it divides the subordinated class and distracts it from uniting against the dominant class. And it's so easy. All the rulers need to do is trigger the scapegoat mechanism. All they need to do to trigger the scapegoat mechanism is remind everyone of the ancient tropes. The parallels between kill Zionists and kill TERFs are not accidental. In fact, in many ways, Jewish men have long been portrayed as feminized, as physically weak and helpless, but cunningly manipulative. Everything that real masculine men are not. Everything that real masculine men hold in contempt. Sort of like women are portrayed, except that Jewish women tend to be portrayed as unfeminine, but not in a really good way. To be manipulated or controlled by Jews is to be unmanned, just as to be manipulated or controlled by a woman is to be unmanned. It's presented as humiliating. Jean-Paul Sartre said, if the Jew did not exist, the anti-Semite would invent him. The most recent global campaign of Jew-hating has been building, especially in Europe, for a decade or so. Its latest manifestation as a campaign of deadly physical terror attacks against Jewish US citizens engaging in peaceful activities in US cities is only a few weeks old, but may be trending. You know, some of the Jewish victims have been old women like me. But regardless of assaults on random Jews, few people want to claim either kinship or empathy with Jews. Those who distance themselves from Jews include, understandably, lots of Jews. Jews, after all, grow up in an anti-Semitic culture, just as lots of women who all grow up under patriarchy are what could be called male-identified. So Jewish children may hear, on the one hand, that mainstream culture empathizes with Jews and opposes anti-Semitism, and on the other hand, that Zionists are evil. If you grow up as a Jewish girl on the political left, you learn that you maybe can be seen as a good Jew, or at least an acceptable Jew, but only so long as you don't advocate for the continued existence of Israel as a Jewish nation. Otherwise, you will be framed as an evil white globalist European colonizer Zionist who pulls international economic purse strings because you believe that Jews are entitled to the one tiny nation where they originated, established sovereignty, and never left. The parallels between good Jew versus evil Zionist and good girl versus evil TERF should be apparent. But sadly, Jew tropes are increasingly popping up even within the women's liberation movement. There are lots of contradictions in how Jews are characterized. The Jew-hating campaign is about generating the desired emotion, not about persuading with facts and logic. So internal contradictions are inevitable. Some say they hate Zionists, but not Jews. That statement is always a lie. Hatred of Zionists is not separate from hatred of Jews. Let's be honest. Jews share not just the religion that their ancestors created. They share a common language, culture, history, and a geographical homeland. Jews are a discrete population, like the Armenians. With or without an official state, Jews are a nationality. If you're against the Jewish people having their own historical state, you are against the Jewish people. Some say they would only hire a Jewish accountant, but others say that Jews are thieves. Some on the left say that Jew is a social construct and that in reality, Jews are just regular white Europeans. But white Europeans on the right march with tiki torches and chant, "Jews will not replace us." They know that Jews are not Europeans. Jews are not Europeans. European nations were some of the lands where some Jews were exiled by the Roman army in the 1st century. All ethnic Jews have Middle Eastern origins in language, culture, religion, and ethics, and in our DNA. European Jews, as distinct from Jews whose ancestors spent the 2,000-year exile in Arab-held lands, naturally have more European DNA. One thing that DNA reveals about European or Ashkenazi Jews is that, perhaps surprisingly, our European DNA is mitochondrial, meaning it was inherited from European mothers. To be clear, Jewish women were regularly raped by European men. It was part of every European pogrom. But even so, by far the largest part of European DNA in Ashkenazi Jews is maternal. How can that be? And when did that happen? Genetic investigation has dated the main introduction of that maternal European DNA to about 2,000 years ago. So it was around the first generation of the diaspora when Jews who were exiled in Europe got lighter. Geneticists theorize that it was mostly Jewish men who were forced out of ancient Judea by the Roman army because it was the men who threatened Roman rule. Some of those Jewish men may have been captured and enslaved by Roman soldiers and then dumped as far as possible from Jerusalem. In the Rhineland, for instance. The theory goes that those exiled Jewish men then married European women who converted to Judaism. Ashkenazi is a Hebrew word for people who lived in the general region that is now called Germany. As a matter of historical fact, one of the first Jewish communities established in exile was in the Rhineland, which is in the western area of what is now Germany. My father's family lived in Alsace, now located in eastern France, adjacent to the Rhineland. His ancestors lived in Alsace for at least 5 centuries that we can document. But based on what is known of general immigration patterns, it is most likely they lived there for 2 millennia. Some of those Germanic Jews later moved eastward toward Poland, Ukraine, and Russia, starting about 600 years or so ago. But those Jews who were exiled in Europe were always treated as other, never as Europeans. And all ethnic Jews still have significant Middle Eastern DNA. It's how genealogy testing can identify us as ethnic Jews. I personally test as greater than 99% Ashkenazi Jew, with most of my ancestors having spent the diaspora in the region of France and Germany. My genealogical documents for the past 500 years show generally Germanic and Polish maternal ancestry and paternal ancestry entirely from Eastern France. So what's the makeup of the Middle Eastern segment? Turns out it has substantial overlap with not only ethnic Jews whose ancestors spent the diaspora in the Middle East or North Africa, but also overlaps substantially with contemporary Jordanians, Palestinians, Kurds, Druze, and, according to analyses of archaeological remains, with ancient Canaanites from more than 3,000 years ago. So that's who Ashkenazi Jews are by a substantial amount that in many cases approaches 50%. For most Israeli Jews who are without significant European ancestry, the percentage of Canaanite DNA is quite a bit higher. So again, ethnic Jews are not Europeans. We are all the direct descendants of the Israelites, some of whom were exiled far from the Jewish homeland. So now, according to popular Jew-hating rhetoric, there could hardly be a more morally corrupt nation on earth than the only Jewish one. The left's agenda of BDS to boycott, divest, and sanction Israel out of existence, and to demonize it as an apartheid genocidal state of European colonizers. That's unique to Israel. No other nation is consistently lied about and targeted in this way. There were other Middle Eastern nations formed at around the same time as Israel, displacing other peoples. And some of those nations commit measurably more human rights violations as a matter of law and culture, especially toward women and girls. But no one is calling for the erasure of Saudi Arabia, only for the destruction of the one Jewish nation. I mean, bear in mind that the existence of just one Jewish nation in the 1930s would probably have averted the attempted genocide of Jews in the Holocaust. Because before Hitler targeted Jews for extermination, he tried unsuccessfully to deport Jews to any nation that would take them in, and not one nation on earth would take us in. I think it's time for feminists to take the lead in telling the truth in all matters, especially if the men who we consider kin in some respects do not tell the truth. I include Jewish men here. To be sure, Jewish men have had unjust burdens. Jewish men's fairly recent ancestors in Europe were barred from European trade guilds while being simultaneously mocked for not doing honest men's labor with their hands. Jewish men were permitted to earn a living by dealing with money while being treated with self-righteous contempt by Christians for their necessarily acquired skill with money. But Jewish men have their own self-hating demons and their own woman-hating demons. There are Jewish men involved in the trans atrocity. There are Jewish men involved in sex trafficking and pornography, including one of my cousins whom I have to see if I ever go to a wedding again in the family. The Jewish men who govern Israel do not always choose justice or compassion or proportionality or even basic democratic values all of the time. Jewish men are no more allies of women than any other ethnic demographic of men. They may have extra challenges in asserting their masculinity, but it is not the job of Jewish women or any other women to support Jewish men in their quest for manliness. I'd say that as a group, Jewish men are not women's allies at all. In fact, I'd go further and say that Jewish men as a group are by far not the best possible public face for the Jewish people. That said, I want to remind radical feminists that Jewish women were way overrepresented in the second wave of the women's liberation movement, especially considering their numbers in the general population. Andrea Dworkin, Adrienne Rich, Kathy Sarachild, Alex Dobkin, Shulamith Firestone, Ellen Willis, countless other early leaders all had Jewish origins. I think it would not be an exaggeration to say that the second wave was created overwhelmingly by Jewish women, Black women, and lesbians, who all held all women as their first priority. The women's liberation movement is a movement by and for all women. Its goal is to completely dismantle patriarchy. We can only accomplish this by capturing the ethical high ground and by resisting patriarchy's attempts to divide us, distract us, and manipulate us through competing loyalties. Those competing loyalties might include loyalty to your man, loyalty to your son, loyalty to your beloved daddy, to your attachment to femininity, or to your race or religion or nationality or ethnicity, or your social or economic class within patriarchy. The sex class, called women and girls, must be our clear, single, highest priority if we're going to bring down patriarchy. But how can we maintain that prioritization when we keep bumping up against each other's other competing allegiances? Just as we were all raised under patriarchy, we were also all raised within our ethnic group, where we felt at home, and where most of us first learned about other ethnic groups, secondhand and unavoidably complete with ancient prejudices. So what can we do when we feel excluded or mischaracterized or disrespected by our sisters on the basis of race or ethnicity? For one thing, we can speak up. We can try to do it without drama or exaggeration or shaming, speaking clearly enough to be heard, but without unnecessarily raising the temperature of the conversation. We can assume a good faith error by a sister. We can be patient, and we can repeat our clarifications of what the facts are and what the harm is and what we need to do to repair it. We need to keep speaking up, keep listening without defensiveness, telling the truth, and documenting that truth over and over if necessary. In ongoing dialogue as sisters, it may seem unfair to especially burdened members of historically oppressed groups to do this education repeatedly. But that's who can do it best, and it needs to be done very well. I believe that patriarchy is the most fundamental basis for the exploitation of one class of people by another. Our aim is to deconstruct patriarchy, and part of patriarchy's arsenal is the weaponization of ethnic and racial differences to keep sisters competing against each other and divided from each other and distracted from deconstructing patriarchy. So if we can persistently, calmly, and patiently speak up, tell the truth, document it, and if our sisters can listen without defending in ongoing dialogue, we might have a shot at staying unified as women, winning the hearts and minds of most people, and bringing down patriarchy. Jewish women are famously hated and resented by Jewish men for being castrating, for unmanning them. Jewish women allegedly accomplished this by infantilizing their sons, by saying no to their sons, by demanding respect from their men, by demanding ethical behavior from their men, by achieving more in their chosen fields than their men, by out-earning their men, by being useless and demanding Jewish American princesses, and by not being more feminine, more pleasing, and more, blonde. Meanwhile, the larger group that generally call themselves progressive, including those who support the trans industry, love to call Jewish women TERFs, Nazis, fascists, and racists. I mean, they love calling all TERFs these things, and they love calling all Jews these things. So there's a special euphoria-inducing thrill in reversing the actual Nazi Holocaust that aimed purposely at literal Jewish genocide and hurling it all at Jewish TERF Zionists. Even better if it's hurled at Judaic TERF Zionists. The implication is that Jews deserved to die horrible, humiliating deaths during the Holocaust. And so do TERFs and lesbians and Zionists now. And someone who's all three, well, why are we still even breathing? It seems that all the ancient hatreds, which had mostly been shamed and contained after World War II, are once again not only fashionable and politically edgy, but sexy. And even starting to be encouraged by some authorities, at the very least, by their lack of courage to act against the apparently populist movement of their beloved young people. But I think I'm seeing an even larger and grimmer picture in the present political and cultural climate. That is, where Jews are framed as other, resulting in the consistent absence of empathy for Jews as fellow humans. Not white and not people of color, and described as having no legitimate ethnicity at all. Jews are framed as homeless and alien everywhere. And that's seen as appropriate because Jews are said to have a dangerously corrupt, global, strictly Jew-centered agenda. But isn't this picture actually a reversal by our accusers? The far left is in fact global. The consistent agenda of the global far left for the last 100 years has been to colonize any independent grassroots human rights campaign that begins to get popular traction on its own. It's as though the global and male-dominated far left cannot tolerate any rights campaign for any group that's not under the control and direction of the global far left. Sometimes it looks as though the far left is a well-organized monolith, giving instructions to its international agents. But I'm not sure that's either true or necessary. Powerful men have learned the usefulness of Jew hating over millennia, from the Romans, from the church, and from Islam. Perhaps Russian bots on social media, the Muslim Brotherhood, the government of Qatar, and the UN Relief and Works Agency are working together. Or perhaps they have all simply adopted the same facile, time-tested, Jew-hating scripts. I'm not sure that it matters. Let me summarize the organized strategy for normalizing the incitement of Jew-hating one more time. Its purpose is to unite and mobilize people worldwide by using Jews as a functional scapegoat. The tactics are brilliantly simple. Frame Jews as alien and then vilify the Jews or a proxy for the Jews, such as Zionism. This is being accomplished presently, first by othering and delegitimizing Jews as either not white or not of color, depending on the strategy's deployment context. And secondly, by characterizing the Jew aliens as exactly the power-hungry global conspiracy that, in fact, far-left totalitarianism is. That, in fact, the church has been, that the Islamic jihadist intifada hopes to be. It's a classic reversal. Additionally, that which is good becomes bad if Jews do it. So there's a built-in conflict for current feminists who work with the current or progressive far left. If the second wave of the women's liberation movement was indisputably the creation of mostly Jewish women, as it was, then that second wave cannot be celebrated by progressive feminists presently without annoying some of their far left colleagues. Some of the so-called socialist feminists, whose primary allegiance is to men on the far left, and who are not to be confused with radical feminists who may hold economic views that align with socialism. They say, aha, there's your proof that radical feminism was and continues to be a global Jewish conspiracy. But their divided loyalties can't ultimately work for these far left women personally, especially if they're Jewish, because being an anti-Zionist Jew won't make you acceptable any more than being a turf-bashing trans man will buy you safety from men who want to rape and torture and kill all women while patriarchy cheers. So, what will it take to send the Jew haters and woman haters back to being a small, disorganized cult with a handful of disorganized fringe cells underground? Pogroms where Jews, women, and lesbians are physically attacked, that's already happening. And it's happening around the world. But the target groups are not presently allowed to be named accurately because accurate naming would summon empathy. So woman is just a costume and a feeling. Jews are European colonialists, and lesbians, as always, are just neurotic man-haters who need to meet the right man. Well, the fact is that race and ethnicity and class do coexist and intersect with sex. And if we are to succeed in this movement to liberate all women and girls from patriarchy, we will all need to prioritize our sex class over any of its subdivisions. That's a challenge because oppressed groups that contain men are always accorded more dignity and more power. As I see it, our job as radical feminists is to hold fast to the prioritization of all women and girls while also remaining sensitive to the racial and ethnic and class divisions within our sex class. This needs to be the standard for all radical feminists, including Jewish women, Arab women, Black women, and radical feminists of any other ethnicity with no exceptions. I want our movement to be self-criticizing in the interests of adhering to radical feminist ethics and in the interests of the universal inclusion of all women and girls everywhere in the world, whether or not they currently support our liberation movement. So we can't prioritize race or ethnicity over sex. But we do need to maintain an ongoing dialogue about race and ethnicity and class and nationality as well, because no woman can truly be free of patriarchy while some women are under its control. Every woman's fully authentic voice needs a way to be heard in our movement if we are to succeed in liberating all women and girls as a sex class from patriarchy. Thank you.